the president who defied tradition and reshaped America. In the history of the American presidency, there are those who led through boldness and grandeur, and then there are those who defied tradition, challenged established norms, and ultimately reshaped the very identity of a nation. This is the story of one such president, a leader whose actions and policies will forever change the course of American history, even when they were met with fierce resistance. This is the story of Andrew Jackson, the 7th President of the United States. Known as Old Hickory for his toughness and unyielding nature, Jackson was a man who rose from humble beginnings to become one of the most controversial figures in American politics. His presidency, which spanned from 1829 to 1837, was marked by significant social and political upheaval, as Jackson challenged the power of the elite, fought for the common man, and enacted policies that would change the landscape of the nation. Jackson's rise to the presidency was a remarkable story of political outsider to political powerhouse. Having been a military hero during the War of 1812, Jackson gained national fame for his victory in the Battle of New Orleans, a battle that made him a symbol of American resilience. His populist appeal, which resonated with the common people, set him apart from the establishment political figures of the time. Jackson's appeal wasn't based on refined political rhetoric or aristocratic lineage. It was based on his image as a man of the people, someone who understood the struggles of ordinary Americans. But Jackson's presidency was anything but conventional. He believed in the power of the presidency itself, often using his veto power to assert his will against Congress. One of his most famous and controversial actions was his war on the Bank of the United States. Jackson believed that the bank, a powerful financial institution controlled by the wealthy elite, was corrupt and posed a threat to the nation's democracy. In 1832, he vetoed the rec harder of the bank, leading to a fierce battle with Congress and eventually securing its dismantling. Jackson's war on the bank was just one example of his commitment to upending the established order. He saw himself as a defender of the common man, someone who would not be swayed by the interests of the rich and powerful. His policies focused on decentralizing power, giving more influence to the states and the people rather than the federal government or the elite. Yet, Jackson's legacy is also deeply stained by his policies toward Native Americans. One of the most controversial and tragic aspects of his presidency was the forced relocation of Native American tribes in what is now known as the Trail of Tears. In the name of progress and expansion, Jackson pushed the Indian Removal Act of 1830, which forcibly relocated thousands of Native Americans from their ancestral lands to designated Indian Territory west of the Mississippi River. This policy led to the suffering and death of thousands of Native Americans, a dark chapter in American history that remains a significant part of Jackson's complex legacy. Despite these contradictions, Jackson's presidency changed the trajectory of the nation. He expanded the powers of the presidency, solidified the Democratic Party as a major political force, and reinforced the notion of a government that was accountable to the people, not just to the wealthy elite. Jackson believed in the idea of majority rule and championed the concept of the common man as central to the American identity, laying the foundation for the populist movements that would come in later years. Despite Andrew Jackson's populist appeal and his reforms that reshaped American politics, his presidency was not without its deep contradictions and significant challenges. While he was hailed as a champion of the common man, his policies toward Native Americans, African Americans, and even his treatment of political opponents raised critical questions about the values he championed. Jackson's disdain for the political elite led him to dismantle what he saw as entrenched aristocratic power. His fight against the Bank of the United States was rooted in his belief that it represented an undemocratic concentration of financial power. In Jackson's eyes, the bank was a symbol of corruption, an institution that catered to the rich and powerful at the expense of ordinary citizens. His successful effort to veto the bank's rec harder in 1832 marked a bold and dramatic move to break the stranglehold of big banks on American politics. This victory solidified Jackson's image as a defender of the people, but also led to significant economic consequences. In the years following the bank's demise, the United States experienced a period of economic instability, culminating in the Panic of 1837. While Jackson's policies were not solely responsible for the economic collapse, the absence of a central bank and his policies of hard currency, including the specie circular, are often cited as contributing factors to the financial crisis. The panic sent the country into a deep recession, causing widespread hardship and giving Jackson's critics fuel for their argument that his aggressive anti-bank stance had destabilized the economy. But Jackson's most tragic and irreversible decision was his treatment of Native Americans. In 1830, he signed the Indian Removal Act, which authorized the forced relocation of thousands of Native American tribes from their ancestral lands to areas west of the Mississippi River. This policy led to the infamous Trail of Tears, where over 4,000 Cherokee people died due to the brutal conditions of the forced march. Jackson's justification for the Indian removal was rooted in the belief that it was for the greater good of American expansion, yet it remains one of the darkest chapters in American history, revealing the deep contradictions between Jackson's ideals and his actions. Jackson's presidency also revealed his volatile temperament and willingness to use force in both domestic and international matters. He frequently used his executive powers to fight against political opponents, most notably his battle against the Whigs, who represented an emerging political force in opposition to Jackson's populism. Jackson's enemies often accused him of acting like a monarch, consolidating power within the presidency and undermining democratic principles. His decision to destroy the Second Bank of the United States, while popular among many, was a stark example of his willingness to wield presidential power without regard for the long-term consequences or opposition from Congress. Even more so, Jackson's infamous spoils system, in which he rewarded political supporters with government positions, further deepened the sense of patronage and political favoritism that defined his administration. While he argued that it was a way to democratize government appointments, critics saw it as a means to fill the government with unqualified individuals loyal to him, weakening the integrity of public offices. Jackson's legacy is a study in contrasts. He was the embodiment of populist ideals, and he reshaped the presidency into a stronger, more dynamic institution. He fought tirelessly for the common man and was a symbol of resilience and determination. Yet his presidency also left a legacy of suffering and division, with his treatment of Native Americans and his disregard for economic stability casting a shadow over his accomplishments. What Jackson's presidency teaches us is that leadership is not one-dimensional. It is shaped by the policies a leader pursues, but also by their moral decisions and the long-term effects those decisions have on the people they govern. Jackson's legacy is a reminder that the fight for political power and change can be fraught with difficult choices. Choices that, for better or worse, will shape the future of a nation. Despite the immense changes Andrew Jackson brought to American politics, his presidency left the nation at a crossroads. Jackson reshaped the American presidency, transforming it into a more powerful office, one that could challenge the will of Congress and the political establishment. Yet, his time in office also revealed the dangers of unchecked presidential power and the profound consequences of divisive policies. Jackson's policies made him a hero to many, but they also set the stage for political tensions that would last for decades. His legacy can be seen in the rise of the Democratic Party and the populist movements that would dominate American politics in the years to come. Jackson's belief in the power of the common people to shape their own destiny found fertile ground in a rapidly changing nation. However, it was his inability to reconcile the deep divisions within the country, racial, economic, and political, that would leave a long-lasting impact. His presidency directly influenced the course of the Civil War, as his advocacy for the expansion of slavery in the South and his disregard for Native American rights were part of a larger system that maintained racial hierarchies. Jackson's policy solidified the Southern planter class's hold on power, entrenching slavery in the heart of American politics. While he might have championed the common man, it was at the expense of those who were enslaved, marginalized, or excluded from the political system. His commitment to white supremacy, though masked by his populist rhetoric, laid the groundwork for the tensions that would eventually erupt in civil war. In addition, Jackson's actions in the economy, particularly his battle with the Bank of the United States, left a legacy of instability. While his supporters praised his anti-bank stance as a triumph of populism, the collapse of the nation's economic infrastructure in the Panic of 1837 proved otherwise. His dismantling of the bank was based on an idealistic belief that the wealthy elite and their financial institutions were the primary threat to democracy. Yet, the resulting financial collapse showed how deeply intertwined political power and financial stability truly were. This conflict between economic power and democratic principles continues to be a challenge in modern American governance. Looking back at Jackson's presidency, it's clear that his leadership was both transformative and fraught with contradictions. His bold decisions strengthened the presidency, but his policies also left lasting scars on the nation, particularly in the areas of race relations, economic policy, and the relationship between the federal government and states. His presidency exemplifies the power of populist rhetoric to mobilize support, but also shows the dangers of governing with a limited sense of responsibility for all Americans. So, what can we learn from Jackson's presidency? Can we draw lessons from his ability to navigate the political arena, or do we need to critically evaluate the consequences of his policies, especially in terms of their lasting impact on racial and economic inequality? Jackson's leadership continues to be a point of debate, but it reminds us that the future of any nation is shaped not just by its victories, but by its ability to address its failures and learn from them. Andrew Jackson's presidency serves as a paradox in American history, a leader whose populist ideals reshaped the nation's political landscape, but whose policies left deep scars that continue to affect the country. Jackson's legacy is defined by his unwavering commitment to the common man, yet his actions as president often contradicted the very ideals he claimed to champion. Jackson expanded the power of the presidency, making it the most influential branch of the government at the time. His decisive use of executive power, whether in his war on the Bank of the United States or his response to the nullification crisis, solidified the presidency as a tool for direct action. Yet, his unchecked use of this power often led to negative consequences, both politically and morally. His approach to governance, one of force, intimidation, and patronage, set a precedent for future presidents, both good and bad. His populist rhetoric made him beloved by many, but his authoritarian tendencies showed the dangers of too much power in one man's hands. The impact of Jackson's policies, however, is most profoundly felt in his treatment of Native Americans. The Indian Removal Act of 1830, which he signed into law, led to the forced relocation and deaths of thousands of Native Americans along the infamous Trail of Tears. This policy, often justified as a means of national progress and the pursuit of economic opportunity, remains one of the darkest chapters in American history. Jackson's belief in manifest destiny, the idea that Americans were destined to expand westward, came at the expense of indigenous people who had lived on the land for centuries. In his eyes, the removal of Native Americans was a necessary sacrifice for American progress, but was, in reality, a genocidal policy that destroyed entire cultures and communities. Jackson's economic policies, particularly his opposition to the Bank of the United States, also left a complicated legacy. His battle with the bank, while portrayed as a victory for the common man, led to severe economic instability. His destruction of the bank and his refusal to regulate currency set the stage for the Panic of 1837, a financial crisis that plunged the country into recession. Despite his intention to fight against the concentration of financial power, Jackson's actions ultimately hurt the very people he sought to protect. His reliance on state-chartered banks and lack of federal oversight contributed to the collapse of the financial system and the economic turmoil that followed. Despite these flaws, Jackson's legacy cannot be dismissed entirely. He transformed the American political landscape, making the presidency a force to be reckoned with. He gave voice to the common man, empowering voters and shaping the Democratic Party as a political institution. Jackson's populism and commitment to his vision of America would inspire future generations of leaders who sought to champion the rights of ordinary citizens. In the end, Andrew Jackson's presidency is a story of contradictions. He was both a hero and a villain, both a champion of democracy and a perpetrator of policies that excluded and oppressed. His presidency changed the United States in profound ways, but the cost of those changes was significant. Jackson's legacy challenges us to think critically about leadership, the balance of power, and the moral consequences of our decisions. So, what do you think? How should we view Andrew Jackson today? Is he a defender of the common man, a revolutionary force in American politics, or is he a figure whose actions left a lasting stain on the nation? As we reflect on his presidency, it's essential to ask ourselves what lessons we can draw from Jackson's leadership, both the good and the bad, and how we can apply those lessons to the challenges we face today.